On the evening of January 30th, 2026, Buckingham Palace broke decades of silence about royal private property. The statement was brief, carefully worded, and absolutely explosive. Lady Louise Windsor, the quiet 22-year-old granddaughter of Queen Elizabeth II, had officially inherited a secret Scottish estate that most of the world didn't even know existed. The Grey House, a name whispered only in the most exclusive palace circles. A property so private, so protected, that even senior royals had never set foot inside its walls. But here's where this story takes a dramatic turn. For weeks before this announcement, Queen Camilla and members of the Parker Bowles family had been fighting behind closed doors to claim that very estate for themselves. They had surveyors, they had lawyers, they had plans, and they lost completely. What you're about to discover is a story of inheritance, power, family betrayal, and one young woman who became the unexpected guardian of the late Queen's most precious secrets: the secret estate. Let's start with the question everyone's asking. What exactly is the Grey House? For over 70 years, this property existed in the shadows. No photographs, no press visits, no official registry linking it to the crown. Royal staff referred to it only by a code name, Site Fee. Most members of the royal family had never even heard of it. The estate sits on over 200 acres of rugged cairngorm terrain in the Scottish Highlands, positioned between historic hunting corridors once favored by Queen Victoria herself. It's remote, windswept, and deliberately invisible. This wasn't just another royal residence. This was Queen Elizabeth's soul space. The property was acquired in 1952, within months of Elizabeth ascending the throne. But here's the fascinating detail. The deed didn't list any royal title. Instead, it was purchased through a private holding company managed by a financial advisor who also handled the Queen Mother's Highland inheritance. The message was clear from day one. This place was meant to stay hidden. According to former palace staff, the Queen would disappear to the Grey House for days at a time. She'd still review her red boxes and handle urgent state business, but otherwise, complete isolation. No briefings, no press, no social demands, no performance. Just Elizabeth, the woman, not Elizabeth, the Queen.
A symbol of selfless duty and ultimate sacrifice.
Prince Philip reportedly hated the place. Too cold, too remote. He rarely visited. Princess Anne spent hunting weekends nearby in her 20s, but kept her distance otherwise. Princess Margaret visited once and never returned. And King Charles. According to multiple sources, he never went there at all. Not once in his entire life. This detail becomes crucial later in our story, because when Queen Camilla tried to claim the Grey House for herself, Charles's complete unfamiliarity with the property left him unable to defend it with any emotional attachment. It wasn't his to protect. It never had been. But what makes the Grey House truly extraordinary isn't just its secrecy, it's what's inside. The archives. Multiple palace sources confirmed that Queen Elizabeth used the Grey House to store some of her most personal and historically significant materials. We're talking about handwritten letters, photographic negatives, and audio recordings that were never digitized, never formally catalogued, and never submitted to the royal archives. Inside those walls are personal diaries from her early reign, correspondence with world leaders including Eisenhower, Mandela, and the Shah of Iran. And perhaps most intriguing of all, voice recordings addressed to her grandchildren, meant to be released only upon specific milestones in their lives. One palace librarian described the collection this way: "There's no scandal in there, just unfiltered memory. But that's what makes it powerful." Under the Crown Archives Act, monarchs can designate certain materials as off-limits through private deed. Once stored outside official archival channels, these materials cannot be claimed by the Crown, by Parliament, or even by the monarch's successor. They belong entirely to the beneficiary.
It is perhaps worth reflecting that at the heart of the word Parliament,
in this case, Lady Louise Windsor. So when the palace announced Louise's inheritance, they weren't just transferring property. They were handing over access to Queen Elizabeth's unfiltered voice, her private thoughts, her personal legacy, the real woman behind the crown. Now think about what that means. Louise, at just 22 years old, has become the sole keeper of materials that historians, biographers, and even other royals cannot access without her permission. She holds what no museum can display and what no monarch can reclaim. But how did this happen? How did a young woman who barely appears in public end up inheriting one of the most significant pieces of royal history? The chosen one. The answer lies in a relationship most people never noticed. During the summers of 2019 through 2021, Lady Louise spent unusually long stretches at Balmoral with her grandmother. While other family members came and went, Louise stayed. She walked with the Queen in the mornings. She read in the private libraries in the afternoons. And crucially, she helped sort personal papers that never reached the royal archives. Former palace staff noticed something distinctive about their dynamic. She didn't perform, one lady-in-waiting recalled. She just was present. That difference, insiders say, became decisive. Queen Elizabeth saw echoes of her own sister, Princess Margaret, in Louise. The same intelligence, the same love of animals and history, the same comfort with silence, but without the drama, without the rebellion, without the desperate need for attention. The Queen had always shown gentle partiality towards certain granddaughters: Catherine, Beatrice, Eugenie, Charlotte, and increasingly in her final years, Louise. But this went deeper than favoritism. This was recognition. In October 2021, just months after Prince Philip's funeral, Queen Elizabeth signed a document that would change everything: a conditional, personal legacy deed. This wasn't her main will. This was a separate, highly specific legal instrument designed to protect the Grey House from ever entering public registry or being claimed by the Crown estate. The deed stipulated three critical things. First, the estate would transfer only upon the final death of all trustees. Second, it would never be subject to Crown review or parliamentary oversight. And third, and this is absolutely crucial, Queen Camilla, her children, and their direct descendants were explicitly excluded from access. This clause was nicknamed Clause 31 by royal legal staff, a reference to the 31st day of Elizabeth's reign when she first visited the estate alone. Only 4 people knew this clause existed: the Queen's personal solicitor, Princess Anne, the late Queen's longtime archivist, and Prince Edward. Each was sworn to secrecy. Each kept their word. Camilla's campaign. Now let's talk about what Queen Camilla didn't know and what she tried to do about it. According to internal documents, Camilla began discreet inquiries into the Grey House as early as October 2024, just weeks after Elizabeth's sealed inheritance letter was opened by her private solicitor. She wasn't asking about it directly. Instead, she asked whether any royal assets had been withheld from duchy estate declarations. Why this approach? Because Camilla understood something fundamental about her position. Her public role was fading. She would never have the same institutional power as Elizabeth. So if she wanted lasting influence, she needed to control symbolism. She needed to control property. She needed to control legacy. In early January 2026, during a private audience at Birk Hall, King Charles's Scottish residence, Camilla made her move. She proposed that the Grey House should be brought under royal stewardship, managed jointly by the Crown and her charitable foundations. The pitch was elegant. She talked about restoration of historic Highland architecture.
I've been actually trying to keep quiet about reaching 3/4 of a century.
Literary retreats for British authors, conservation projects tied to rewilding initiatives, limited invitation-only heritage tourism. But palace insiders say the proposal contained something far more ambitious beneath the polish. Control of the Grey House would mean proximity to Balmoral, one of the monarchy's most symbolic Scottish holdings. It would mean influence over historically sensitive archives. And perhaps most important, it would mean attaching the Parker Bowles name to one of Queen Elizabeth's most personal sanctuaries. She wasn't asking for a cottage, one official said dryly. She was asking for geography, legacy, and leverage. Here's where it gets genuinely shocking. Camilla reportedly sent surveyors to the region weeks before even making the formal proposal, under the banner of environmental evaluation. Architectural consultants prepared restoration budgets. Tourism specialists explored boutique-level heritage programming. To anyone familiar with how the palace operates, the direction was unmistakable. This wasn't a casual suggestion. This was a coordinated campaign. King Charles didn't reject the idea publicly. Instead, he did something far more royal. He stalled. Meetings were deferred. Legal counsel was consulted. The Royal Estate Council was asked to review ownership structures that hadn't been touched since the early 1950s. Then, during a closed session on January 12th, attended only by the king, his private secretary, and 2 constitutional advisors, Charles issued a soft but immovable line. The estate was not available for reassignment, not now, not ever. But notice what he didn't say. He didn't reference his mother's instructions. He didn't mention Edward's household. He didn't utter Lady Louise's name. Instead, he framed the refusal as a matter of pre-existing private settlement beyond Crown review. The tone was gentle, controlled, but final, one advisor recalled. Camilla left the meeting composed, but sources say she was visibly shaken, because by then, she already suspected what was coming. The reveal. 3 days after Charles's refusal, the palace confirmed what Camilla's advisors had feared. The Grey House had been left outright to Lady Louise Windsor, not to Prince Edward, not to a shared family trust, not to royal administrators, to Louise alone. The late Queen's private will, sealed in October 2021, designated her youngest Wessex granddaughter as sole and unrestricted owner. That included all buildings, land titles, archival holdings, staff contracts, and a perpetual right to refuse public access. One clause now circulating among senior courtiers reads, "This house is to remain a refuge, not a monument." Think about the structure of this bequest for a moment. The property bypassed Edward himself and flowed directly to his daughter. In effect, it was a dowry-like gift, an act of affection and, to some, unmistakable favoritism. But among those who knew Elizabeth II best, the decision produced nods rather than surprise. This was vintage Elizabeth, deliberate, protective, willing to make uncomfortable choices to preserve what mattered most. For the Parker Bowles family, the announcement landed like an earthquake. Tom Parker Bowles had already explored heritage partnerships linked to Highland food tourism. Advisors had quietly researched zoning regulations near the Grey House months earlier. Suddenly, all of it evaporated. The mood was shock first, then disbelief, then rage, one family associate recalled. To them, the message felt brutal. The Queen had drawn a final boundary, and they were outside it. Phone calls ricocheted across London and Gloucestershire. Lawyers were consulted, then dismissed when the will proved ironclad. And at the center of the storm stood Camilla, trying to reconcile her years of service with a legacy she had never been allowed to touch. But here's what makes this story even more extraordinary. Louise had been preparing for this moment in secret for nearly a year. The training. Far from the public eye, Lady Louise had been visiting the Grey House in secret since mid-2025. Multiple sightings were confirmed by local residents near Glenmore Village. She arrived in plain clothing, accompanied by a discreet female protection officer, and stayed for up to 5 days at a time. Locals were told she was part of a university research team studying geographic history. In reality, she was being trained by 2 former archivists and 1 royal legal advisor in cataloging primary sources, managing estate staff, and preparing legal claims of private title succession. She knew this wasn't just a gift, a retired archivist told Royal Insider. It was a stewardship. She took it seriously from day one. What's remarkable is how the inheritance was activated. There was no press event, no public appearance, not even a new title for Louise. Instead, a single line on a government land register was updated. Then, on the evening of January 25th, Buckingham Palace issued a simple statement confirming what had already occurred. Royal observers now view it as a strategic masterstroke by the late Queen, because while the Grey House is private property, the implications are deeply institutional. Lady Louise is no longer just the quiet granddaughter. In the wording of the will, she is now a keeper of royal memory, holding what no museum or monarch can access without her consent. And in doing so, she now stands legally and symbolically above Camilla in one key dimension: legacy. The Allies. Louise didn't navigate this inheritance alone. She had three critical allies who worked behind the scenes to ensure the transfer succeeded. First, Princess Anne. The Princess Royal wasn't just supportive of Louise, she was the executor of the transfer. According to internal royal memos, Anne ensured the staff at the Grey House remained under private payroll through the Royal Heritage Trust, not the Crown estate. She personally delivered the key to the property in a sealed envelope to Louise during a private writing retreat in Scotland. And most importantly, when Camilla attempted to contest the inheritance with a petition through the Privy Purse legal office, Anne shut it down in a single sentence: "You do not challenge the last wish of the sovereign. You honor it." Second, Duchess Sophie, Louise's mother. Rather than engage Camilla publicly, Sophie worked behind the scenes to block any legal audit of Louise's personal finances, prevent media leaks regarding the estate's location, and ensure Louise received private intelligence briefings about surveillance attempts on the property. Yes, surveillance attempts. According to cybersecurity experts hired by the Duke of Edinburgh's office, attempts were made in late 2025 to drone scan the property's roofline and install remote trail cameras on the estate's northern tree line. None succeeded because Sophie had prepared for this, because she knew how desperate Camilla had become. Third, and perhaps most surprisingly, Prince Edward himself. At the most critical juncture in November 2025, just before the public inheritance record was filed, Camilla reportedly called in a personal favor from Edward. She asked him to delay the release, citing family unity, future legal clarification, and the need to cool tensions. Edward refused. His response was devastating in its simplicity. "My daughter will not be a placeholder for your ambitions. You had your turn." And with that, the final barrier crumbled. The inheritance was finalized. The deed was transferred. And Queen Camilla, for the first time since Elizabeth's death, found herself powerless. The Brooch. On a quiet January afternoon, Lady Louise Windsor walked through the gates of Greyfriars Church, a centuries-old chapel nestled in the Scottish Highlands near the Grey House. No security detail, no entourage, no royal protocol, but one detail could not be missed. Pinned to her lapel was a brooch never before seen in public. Royal historians were stunned. The piece featured an interlaced design of silver thistle and Tudor roses, centered by a small diamond heart, unmistakably Edwardian in origin. The signature detail, a discreet engraving on the underside, for service, not spectacle. This phrase was part of a private motto used by Queen Elizabeth II in her handwritten correspondence with only three people: Princess Anne, Prince Philip, and Lady Sarah Chatto. The implication was clear. This wasn't an accessory. It was a signal. Louise was no longer hiding from royal life. She was answering it. After placing flowers on the altar and lighting a candle, Louise stepped up to the microphone, ostensibly for a local charity announcement. What she delivered instead became the most shared royal video clip of January 2026. "The house I inherited is not a trophy. I do not claim it because of my name, but because of what I've learned from those who came before me. Quiet loyalty, private strength, and faith that does not perform but protects. I will not run from the inheritance of character, and I will not allow its memory to be rewritten for convenience." Then she bowed, not to the press, not to the cameras, but to a stone plaque behind the altar, marked with a quote from Queen Elizabeth II's first Christmas broadcast. "It is not the crown that grants duty. It is duty that gives meaning to the crown." Within hours, the palace issued a rare response, not from the king, but from Princess Anne herself. Lady Louise speaks not as a future monarch, but as a guardian of what cannot be inherited, moral authority. Her voice is her own, and it is clear. The Backlash. King Charles reportedly cleared his calendar for the next 48 hours, and held a private meeting with Edward at Balmoral's north wing. Camilla, meanwhile, was photographed entering Clarence's house alone, appearing visibly upset. She was caught off guard by the timing and felt betrayed by the lack of advance notice. One insider noted, "She thought the family had closed ranks, but instead they circled around Louise." The British tabloids erupted. Windsor's silent flame ignites a new era. Louise's Grey House speech, a crownless coronation, Camilla outmaneuvered by the youngest of the old guard. But perhaps the most surprising reaction came from Princess Catherine. While she didn't issue a formal statement, her Instagram account posted a single photo showing a handwritten note in elegant script signed C. The note read, "Legacy is not what we receive, it's what we choose to preserve." The post was tagged with hashtag #GreyHouse and hashtag #WindsorDuty. Within 20 minutes, it had over 2 million likes. Sources inside St. James's Palace confirmed that Louise's speech prompted an emergency gathering of the Royal Continuity Office, a team tasked with tracking succession optics and legacy alignment. Their concern? The public's response to Louise was creating a shadow narrative outside of Camilla's influence and potentially even overshadowing Prince William's formal role. But William wasn't threatened. In fact, he approved Catherine's post personally and reportedly told her, "She's doing what we were raised to do. She's just doing it better than some of us ever could." Camilla's counter-move. Within 72 hours of Louise's remarks echoing through the global press, Queen Camilla's office announced a sudden and elaborate initiative, the Crown's Compassion, a life in modern royal service, scheduled to debut at St. George's Hall. The timing raised eyebrows. The announcement came just 30 minutes after the Royal Collection Trust confirmed Louise's joint archival project with Princess Anne, titled The Quiet Years. Even the venue selection appeared strategic. St. George's Hall was one of Queen Elizabeth II's favorite ceremonial spaces, reserved for state banquets, royal weddings, and mourning processions. Now Camilla sought to reframe it as her stage. "The public needs reminding that loyalty is not measured in silence," she reportedly told aides. "I have served with or without approval." The Queen's maneuver was met with what one aide described as icy patience. Princess Anne reportedly refused to comment when asked by press at a naval charity dinner. Her only remark, given with a raised smile, "Some stories write themselves." But the true blow came from King Charles himself. Instead of attending Camilla's exhibition launch as scheduled, he delayed his arrival by an entire day, citing a health review meeting at Balmoral. In his place, only a handful of lesser royals attended. To those who knew how to read the signals, it was a clear royal demotion in real time. The exhibition opened to lukewarm public response. Critics noted the lack of emotional authenticity. Several exhibits were heavily focused on photographs of Camilla herself, with captions highlighting her role beside the sovereign and transformation of royal expectations. One royal biographer wrote, "It is less a tribute to service and more a scrapbook of a contested reign." On social media, the backlash was sharper. The hashtag #GreyHouseOverGlamour began trending. More notably, Catherine posted a story showing Louise, Anne, and 3 staffers sorting archival boxes. The caption, "Work, not display. Duty, not decoration." The post garnered over 3 million interactions in under a day. The confrontation. On the evening of January 26th, Camilla confronted Princess Anne in what royal staff later described as a glass chandelier moment in the Long Gallery at Windsor Castle. The conversation, though private, was leaked in fragments by multiple witnesses. Camilla, visibly trembling, accused Anne of sabotaging her public role by manipulating a child into taking the spotlight. Anne, according to sources, did not raise her voice. She simply replied, "If the spotlight finds her, Camilla, it's because the public sees what you're trying to hide." When Camilla countered that Louise was never meant to be a working royal, Anne's reply stunned even the courtiers nearby. "Neither were you, and yet here we are." Camilla reportedly left the room without another word. The silence that followed was said to be funeral grade. Days later, Camilla's exhibition was quietly shuttered, citing reallocation of space for public renovations. No farewell statement was issued. Instead, the royal family's official website uploaded a new banner, The Quiet Years, a reflection on unseen service, opening spring 2026, curated by Lady Louise Windsor and HRH, Princess Anne. Underneath was a single quote from Queen Elizabeth II. What is remembered with dignity endures longer than what is displayed for applause. It was a masterstroke. Louise's message had been absorbed by the institution itself. Camilla's efforts to reframe the narrative had been absorbed, then erased. The offer. By early February 2026, the name Lady Louise began appearing in headlines not typically reserved for minor royals. Newspaper editorials called her the Queen's true heir in spirit. University campuses invited her to speak about youth, duty, and legacy. A BBC poll released on February 5th revealed a startling figure. 71% of Britons believed that Lady Louise should receive a formal title and full royal status if she chose to pursue public duties. In Scotland, where the Grey House was located, support was even higher, 84%. On the evening of February 7th, Buckingham Palace quietly confirmed that King Charles III had extended a formal offer to Lady Louise, full elevation to Her Royal Highness Princess Louise, with duties including youth education, cultural heritage, and intergenerational leadership programs. But the offer came with conditions. She would need to reside part-time in London, undergo formal security evaluation, accept assigned protection, and cease any private commercial endeavors, including her beloved equestrian coaching sessions. The offer divided the royal household. Princess Anne was cautiously supportive, but stern, believing Louise could serve without sacrificing her identity. Sophie was reportedly emotional. "It's not the title that worries me," she told aides. "It's the weight that comes with it." But not everyone welcomed Louise's rise. The attack. On February 8th, Meghan Markle appeared on a U.S. talk show and made veiled comments many interpreted as a direct attack on Louise. When people are elevated based on silence rather than service, we must ask ourselves what values are being rewarded. Though Meghan never mentioned Louise by name, social media exploded. The hashtag #SilencePrincess began trending, pushed largely by Archewell-affiliated fan accounts. Anonymous sources claimed Louise had been groomed by the institution and was only given a platform to erase those who dared to speak. In response, Princess Anne and Prince Edward jointly issued a rare statement. Lady Louise Windsor has neither asked for a throne nor a stage. She has only ever accepted responsibility when others discarded it. The message was crisp, understated, and devastatingly effective. The backlash against Meghan's comments was swift, with multiple British media outlets branding her remarks as petty, desperate, and tone-deaf. On February 10th, standing on the steps of the Grey House in soft Highland snow, Louise unveiled her own initiative, independent of palace protocol. The Grey House initiative will serve not just as an archive, but as a living trust for duty, designed to uplift those who serve quietly, protect heritage, and prepare young people for ethical leadership. The announcement, streamed live, drew over 9 million viewers. When pressed on whether she would accept the HRH title, Louise paused. Her answer stunned the room. "I am grateful for my family's trust, but I believe duty does not require a title. For now, I remain simply Lady Louise." Days later, the palace confirmed that King Charles had personally written her a hand-delivered letter, a tradition not used since Queen Elizabeth II wrote to Prince William on the eve of his investiture. The letter reportedly included the line, "Your grandmother believed that greatness grows in silence. I now see she was speaking of you." Louise's reply, according to palace aides, moved Charles to tears. "I will not seek a throne." By mid-February, royal commentators agreed a new moral axis had formed within the monarchy. On one side were those who sought the spotlight, leveraging title for narrative. On the other was Lady Louise, who had declined elevation but earned reverence. She had inherited not just Queen Elizabeth's private estate, but her ethical legacy. She had endured attacks without retaliation. She had spoken with humility, acted with courage, and rejected vanity when it was easiest to accept. And so, even without a crown, without an official HRH title, the people began calling her something else, the Guardian of the Grey House. The question now is not what Lady Louise will become, but what the monarchy itself will become, with her quiet influence reshaping its foundation from within. Because sometimes, the most powerful inheritance isn't property or title. It's the choice to serve with dignity when no one is demanding performance, to protect what matters when others would exploit it, to speak truth when silence would be easier. Lady Louise Windsor has inherited all of that, and in doing so, she's reminded us all what true royalty actually looks like.